Howdy. This is Mission Texas,
a political podcast about winning Texas by 2032, or else we may lose the White House for a generation.
I'm one of your hosts, Alex Clark.
And I am Kate Rumsey.
Other podcasts may focus on the day-to-day or the next election, but we are keeping the eyes of Texas on the bigger prize. What happens after the next census?
Today, we are with Alex Andrade, my friend, a donor, an organizer turned consultant, and fundraising strategist. We'll talk about how he got here, why fundraising consultants are rare, and whether Texas Democrats are about to have their Luka moment. Yes, we are going to talk about the Mavs. So welcome to the podcast, my friend Alex Andrade. Thank you.
Thank you. You knew you had to mention the Mavs to get me excited.
Yeah. For context for our listeners, I'm on a political text thread, and usually we're just talking about the Mavs. So in our group, Alex Andrade, and it's the Alex times 2 episode. So when I'm talking about Alex, I don't know who I'm going to be talking about.
Yeah, I might say Mr. Andrade or something like that.
Sir Andrade. Okay, so Alex, did you figure out, Andrade, that you would be in this position where you would be a consultant right now? Because last cycle, I remember you raised over $1 million for a congressional campaign, and you are trying to do it again. Did you ever think that you were going to get here? And also, by becoming a consultant, were you trying to solve a problem that you saw?
So it was purely accidental. I mean, I had agreed to help Sam Epler run for Congress and tried to get him a meeting with a large fundraising firm, and they didn't take the meeting because I think they just had so many clients. And so at that point, I realized there's not many people doing this. And so I had done fundraising for early stage Texas progressive groups and done a lot for different candidates over the years, and figured, well, I can give this a try. And I was his fundraising consultant for the primary, and we raised about $400,000 for that in a pretty ignored district. And so a lot of what I did for him was try to come up with messaging that would explain, why give to me. Now, he was a very gifted fundraiser on his own, but most political clients are very uncomfortable asking for money. It's really hard. They can do a great meeting and then the end happens and they don't make the ask. And so it's a real need out there to help people. I was helping a 25-year-old teacher. Now I'm helping a former Marine, people that are not comfortable asking for money. Maybe have not spent time with, a lot of donors, and that's kind of uncomfortable then too. So I feel like there's a real need to help those people craft their message effectively so that they can fund their campaign.
So what does that look like? What makes a good consultant stand out? And just for the listeners who don't know, Sam Epler ran against Beth Van Dyne. You might call her BVD, our own Texas version of MTG. Not a very competitive district in terms of what people think of as a swing district, but it was targeted on purpose, and there was a reason why people were willing to give to this race. So, what did you find was successful? Like, what makes someone who does this stand out?
Well, I mean, what made it successful was we were very honest with people, and we didn't try to tell them this was a shoo-in, we're going to win it. We were very honest and said, look, this is a tough district. They drew it red. You know this, but you don't turn districts and you don't win races unless you invest. Investing means funding a campaign that will go knock on doors, talk to voters, and eventually you break through. So a lot of our donors were sort of long-term thinkers, really investors more than transactional, where you want this certain election to go a certain way. Now that's harder this cycle because I think we had some missteps in the state, not really due to anybody's fault. There just was not the turnout that I think all of us hoped. So we've got to kind of rebuild that. As far as, what makes somebody successful at fundraising, I mean, it's like a lot of jobs. It's just elbow grease. It's just going to things, meeting people. As I told Sam, I mean, I set up play dates for my kids all the time. I'm just here to set up play dates for you, and that's kind of what I did. I just introduced him, made sure he met all the right people that cared about the district, and he usually took it from there.
But to be fair, though, to you, my friend, you had those connections already. And so, can you give our listeners a sense of how you got to the place where you had those connections and stepped into that that needed a fundraising consultant for Sam? Like, what had you been doing prior to that?
I'd basically been a donor and done a lot of volunteer fundraising for groups like Texas Civil Rights Project, Move Texas, Faith in Texas, and tons of candidates. I'll take my daughter to go block walk for him. I'll give money. And so I just over the years, I've met a lot of donors at other donor events. And so I just came from that world. So, but I think if somebody's starting out or trying to get into it, you can be a call time manager. You can help the candidate call donors. You can help set up events, and then you start to build your own network as well. So it's a field where I think we need more good people. There's not enough people doing it right now.
So it sounds like you already had pardon the term here for our younger listeners, but you already had a Rolodex kind of ready to set those play dates up. And then it was up to the candidate to, was a line from that Alec Baldwin movie, always be closing.
ABC.
Coffee is for closers.
Yeah. I give them a lot of coffee. But yeah, that was mostly the primary. Once we ran through all those contacts, like any other candidate, you got to do call time. You got to call statewide donors. You've got to go to events and meet new donors. There's always people coming in and out. There's people that are frustrated. They've been doing it 20 years that are just like, I'm done. I've given what I'm going to give. And then there's new people that are newly invigorated. So finding those people. And some of that came from just hitting the phones and calling donors. I mean, it's not sexy, but it's how you get new connections as well.
See, this is what I think is fascinating, because that district, I would argue, is much redder, much more of an uphill fight on the congressional district level than a statewide race is in Texas, just based on the numbers as they have been in recent cycles.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's right. We think it's one of the more interesting congressional districts because it isn't rural. It's all suburban, and it's 2/3 in Tarrant. And just to give you some numbers, the Dallas part of the district, we have 2/3 of the precinct chairs filled. The Tarrant part of the district, it's only a quarter. The Dallas part of the district, we have probably 10 active Democratic clubs where people can go get organized and volunteer for campaigns. There's probably 3 on the Tarrant side. So Tarrant, we believe, is just a non-voting purple area. We saw Beto flip it in 2018. So it is an area that can be mobilized, that can be a lot more blue. And our margins in the Dallas side versus Tarrant were, over 10 points. It was a lot more red in Tarrant. So we believe, we want to flip that. And I just frankly have the connections, and I know the people that live in this district. It was formerly my district when Colin Allred won it. So we feel like, we should take it back. So everybody's doing different things. I agree, statewide, there's really some exciting opportunities. But this is kind of my little niche.
Yeah. Well, so this is the 24th congressional district, which is where I live. And it's where, just situationally, it's in North Texas, straddles between Dallas and Fort Worth, sort of as you're saying, for the people that might not be from Texas or might not be familiar with North Texas. But for context, you helped Sam's race in the 24th last cycle, Epler, and now you're helping out in another congressional race. But what I find interesting as a former candidate is that I found out, and I did not realize this, is that as a congressional candidate, or even any candidate, most of your time is spent fundraising. Like, I was taught in a campaign school that 80-90% of your time should be spent on the phone or talking to donors, and most of what you're trying to do is fundraise. And yet, as what you mentioned earlier, we don't have many consultants in this field. We've got a lot of other kind of consultants, especially not even in Texas, but all over the country in DC. But can you give us a sense of like where we are, like situationally, like the state of the world right now as far as fundraising consultants go, and like why we don't have as many, maybe. I don't know if you can answer that, but
Well, let
just
me start with the first part. I do think there needs to be a better balance struck between how much time the candidate spends raising money and how much time they're actually talking to voters. If you're only raising money, you're never meeting people, you're never doing the rallies, you're never doing the town halls, and this campaign that I'm helping with Kevin Burge, we're going to do a lot of that grassroots stuff. So there's a sort of an optimal amount of, consultants that are on your call that do digital and mail and TV, more is better, right? So they're going to tell you keep going because that's what they do. They do mail and TV for people with money. But there needs to be a pushback from the campaign staff saying, okay, yeah, but we've also got to go get out and meet people and do events and have you knocking on doors and meeting regular people. So that's a balance that needs to be struck. But it is true. If you want to run a real campaign, you do have to have a certain amount of money. You got to pay for staff. You need we still need a comms person. We need a field person. Staff is going to be most of our expense. And then you need to get the word out somehow. So it is an unfortunate reality. I'm just playing the game they've made the rules for, but I'd love some different rules for sure.
Well, what I liked about what you said earlier is that it's an investment. And you can make a pitch in a red district for people to invest, and you made the pitch successfully. The way I'm hearing this is there seems like the mail and TV are short-term investments. This podcast, as you know, we've talked about, is about long-term investments. What are the kinds of expenditures a campaign, even at the district level, can make such that it's moving the ball forward beyond this cycle? Because it sounds like that's one of the things that you were able to bring donors on to that bigger vision, right?
Yeah, that's really the key question. That's a great question, because it does all go away after the campaign ends. But I'd say one of the things a campaign can do that does endure is knocking on doors, because then you've usually a voter has a good memory of you. You came to their door, asked them what they cared about. That is something long-term that I think a lot of the other expenditures are not. And then the other thing I think people can think about doing is just being a little bit more efficient with their giving. So, a statewide campaign that raises 80, there's a certain amount of money they raise where they got to pay all the staff. They got to do basic advertising, maybe that's 20, 30, 40 million. But then that marginal dollar after that, they're just doing extra mailers and extra TV because they've already it's already more than their budget. And so you take and I did this, kind of analysis. And I can just run through real quick on the amount of money we spent to get an extra voter in 2022 with Beto, who's an amazing candidate. This is not about the candidate. This is about the use of the dollars that they raised. So Beto got 3,553,000 raw votes. Mike Collier got 3,492,000. So Collier had really no money, not much name ID. So Beto got 58,000 or 61,000 extra votes for $77 million. Okay. And some of that was just people knew him and they wanted to vote for him and they'd seen him on TV. So some of that's what we call earned media. But so if you calculate for that, you're basically saying $2,600 per vote. That's what we were buying when you donated to Beto. You're buying an extra vote.
Be clear, we're not buying any votes, but I understand what you're saying.
No, yeah, that's probably the wrong term to buy a vote. But
that clip is going to go on Republican media, and you're going to have a field day. Beto was buying votes.
But so that's a lot, right? And some of that was field. I'm biased. I love field. But if you tell me, Kate, because you did field, if you pay somebody $25 to do an hour of canvassing, maybe they talk to 6 or 7,
yeah,
and maybe get you a vote. Maybe most of those people were already going to vote for you, but that's $25 an hour if you get a vote, right? It's just it's 1% of what we're spending on a big program statewide.
Well, I will tell you, I mean, we're seeing this with the mayoral race in New York with how much field they're doing, but I think they're capped at the certain amount of money they can raise. But I know for me, I would have this war with myself of how should I spend this extra hour of time? Like I had a certain amount of time in a day, time is finite. Do I spend those hours trying to chase some money that might then only be used to pay for a mailer or some text or digital? Or do I want to go knock on 10 to 20 doors and I maybe be able to, during a sweet spot time of the day, I can maybe talk to half of those doors. They will open for me and I can convince every single one of those people to vote. So it was such a time where I thought, time value of money, what do I do to actually, that is more bang for my buck? And
Right.
so, I mean, and I think we also saw this with the differential between Colin Allred's race and Beto's race, which I think Beto did focus a lot on field, where I think Collins was a bit different strategy, where he probably raised a lot of money and spent a lot of it, as I understand, on media at the end. And maybe I'm wrong, but it was sort of a differential. And you see that kind of war. And I actually talked to a person who had done a lot of races statewide. And I said, how do I spend my time? What do I do? Do I raise more money and call donors who won't call me back, or field? And she was like, look, this is how a lot of people feel and what their emphasis is in a race. Like, do you want to, and you see it and it's evidenced in a race, like what are they prioritizing in that race is shown like outwardly, like what are they spending their money on? And you see that with Beto's race. He was more interested in rallies and maybe field work. So,
Yeah.
um,
And just to fully answer Alex's second part of his question on how do we invest, it's not just field for campaigns, but it's also looking at civic education groups, voter registration groups, turnout groups that do work year in, year out. In the field, we call it infrastructure, but it's really just groups that every cycle are going to be engaging voters, getting them excited. And it's not always just they're registering. They can be doing community events. One group, Somos Tejas in Dallas, was helping people out during COVID, giving them information, talking to them at the door. You build that loyalty in a community, and then when it's time to vote, you do maybe a candidate forum. So you're doing some civic education, and you're getting your people more interested in politics. So I think those are really good uses of your money. As well, like that's long-term stuff. The reason Georgia flipped was because they invested a lot more in those groups. Stacey Abrams had done a lot of that, and we just have not put as much money into those groups, and we have not funded as many groups. So that's a real important thing for people to sort of reorient their giving to more of that.
I think Georgia is a great example. I also think a lot about Florida. I remember there being a story about how Democrats spend a lot of money on radio ads, Spanish language radio ads in Florida. Well, at the same time that the Republicans were just buying the radio station. So that ad money, you light it on fire, you say your little message and it's gone. But now every cycle, the Republicans can get their message out year round on this radio station. So I would love to see just a shift in that kind of long-term mindset happen in Texas as well. Because you're right, these nonprofits, these civic education groups, they're doing the work year-round, not just showing up when it's time to get the vote. I think if we can think more expansively, even beyond voter registration, to think about communications, right? This is selfish because we are starting a podcast, but we need to have more media organizations. Like I know that you're involved with Progress Texas, a great example of a group that is just doing it day in and day out. As they say, campaigns come and go, right? But Progress Texas is always there. And so I think we're getting outgunned on that front. And so I would just stop talking now and have your thoughts.
I agree. And Kathleen, our executive director, has added this year a daily podcast that's like an 8-minute summary of what's going on in Texas politics, which I think is really good. We've built out our TikTok stuff. So we're trying to talk to younger voters that maybe aren't always that consistent a voter, to give them information. But yeah, we need more of that. We need more messaging. We need more podcasts like yours to I mean, podcasts for me have increasingly become a bigger percent of how I consume information as well, because I can do other things and I'm listening. So it's just more efficient. So I think, and look, I mean, this is why I'm so thrilled to see Tallarico on Rogan. Like, one of the mistakes we make is not going on the Theo Vaughns and the Rogans and talking to different audiences. So, I think that's really important for candidates to do.
Just keep telling us why we're good and why we need a podcast. So,
We'll
well,
use this in our pitch materials.
yeah, but I guess I have a question. Do we need to raise more money in Texas? Because I think something that you told me before was that we don't really have a money problem. It's where we're investing it, and also convincing the people to invest here in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, I think the money going out of state has always been a problem, but that gets solved very easily by some wins or some close wins, right? You have to give people help, some hope. I mean, you can't just. I mean, everybody had some great wins in 18, and we haven't done much since. So it's like, you got to give people something, right? So the money is there; it'll come back in the state. Yeah, and my whole pitch, which is why I walked through those numbers, is we can spend it better. I mean, we can routinely fund a statewide campaign for $80 million. I don't know the total spent on all our infrastructure groups, but last I heard it was 5 million. Maybe it's closer to 10 by now. So we just have to shift those dollars to, I think, investing in the groups. And then I think donors need to hold campaigns a little more accountable for, what are you doing with the money right now? Like, tell me what the return on that is. Is how is this going to get us some more votes?
Yeah, and I wanted to follow up with that because I know you're part of a group called The Bridge, which figures out where to put money. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about that group?
Yeah, so this was started by Drew Galloway, who took over Move San Antonio before it was Move Texas, with a tiny budget, and made it a real force in voter registration at colleges. And what they do, again, they civically engage the kids. They meet them at campus with peers that go to the school. They get their cell phones. They ask them what issues they care about. They put on candidate forms, and they started out getting kids interested in the San Antonio mayoral race. He grew that group, and then he decided about 4 or 5 years ago he wanted to incubate new groups in Texas that we don't have enough. We have some good ones, but they all cover kind of the same areas. So it's basically like venture capital or incubator model for new Texas progressive groups. So every 3 months, we give them 50 grand, and we give them a 6 to 9 month training on how to fundraise, how to run a group, how to do finance and legal and compliance. And we help somebody go from, I'm doing volunteer on my weekends running this group, to, I want to be an ED and make this a real group. And so and again, back to the money, we've got foundation money from outside Texas that wants to invest in Texas, that sees Texas as eventually a battleground. And so but we realized we just didn't have enough groups doing stuff. And so what those groups do, they all focus on very specific areas and things they do. So we've got a group like Radical Registrars that registers people in San Antonio. We've got a new group, Cornerstone, that registers college kids in a lot of places. Move or TFN haven't gone. So that is, I think, vitally important. And so we encourage people to apply, and we want to help them grow. And a lot of people that don't get accepted the first time, we put them in another group and help them. So we're trying to just help start new groups, and the more, the better.
Where can people find it?
You go to bridgemovements.org, and you can apply if you have, you've been doing something, not like a brand new idea and you've never done it, but if you've been doing something on the side, registering voters or engaging your community, or even advocating for an issue in front of City Hall, and you want to take it to the next level, then you can apply, and we'd love to talk to you.
I think it's so great. And I know Drew, and Move San Antonio more broadly. I was a campus organizer at UTSA during the 2014 cycle. Back in the day, before Battleground Texas really kind of became smaller than it was intended. I think Battleground Texas is such an interesting case study in this kind of long-term investment thinking that just got distracted and drawn to the bright lights of a celebrity candidate at the top. And I hate to say it that way, because Wendy Davis, I've been a fan of hers way before she ran for governor. She had a filibuster before the big filibuster, where she stood on behalf of public education. And I had been a fan of hers since then. And the way I see it, because it's very personal to me, I was a 2013 first group of fellows, volunteer for Battleground Texas, and then my first paid campaign job doing field and then campus organizing for the governor's race, when Battleground Texas essentially became the Wendy Davis for governor campaign. But the beauty of the idea, whenever Jeremy Byrd, the Obama field director, came and had his first meeting with then Mayor Julian Castro, and I think he's probably still a state representative, or maybe he was already a congressman at the time, is Joaquin Castro. He was like, look, we have to treat Texas like a battleground state, right? No one's going to think it is until we treat it like one. And what we were doing was building neighborhood teams. We were giving trainings on here's how you actually do canvassing. Here's how you do a phone bank. And we were empowering people to do the real work that, let's be honest, the Texas Democratic Party as an organization just wasn't doing. As you mentioned, there are lots of parts of the state that still have no precinct chairs. We had an interview with Kendall Scudder, and he'll be the first to tell you, we do not have the people in place. And so what I saw Battleground Texas was fulfilling a huge need. And so unfortunately, we've lost, I think, the momentum, because people associated, we called it BGTX, right, Battleground Texas, with the Wendy campaign that obviously did not work out. And so that kind of just deflated the air of that balloon. But I think what Kate and we really want to ask you about is this kind of phenomenon where you pin all your hopes and dreams on one person. It's okay if you want to make the analogy.
Is it, as Texas Democrats, are we having our Luka moment here with the Mavs? You know, we got the generational talents. We're relying on them season over season, and 1 year the rug will be pulled out from under us, and that's going to be 2028. We're not going to have a top of the ticket. So are we about to have our Luka moment? Like, what are we doing here?
This might be a clumsy analogy, but if Beto is our kind of energizer, our kind of Luka, if you might say, 2018, 2022, like if he doesn't run, what are we going to do, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's why you have drafts and you get Cooper Flag. So there's
always. I was
always
just about to ask, is James Talarico our Cooper Flag?
Yeah.
Our young guy, we weren't expecting to come in and get everybody excited.
But I think so candidate stuff first. I think there's a lot of amazing candidates. I mean, I got first involved in Texas politics because of Wendy. I love Colin, Beto. You know, we put out these amazing people, and then we pin all our hopes and dreams on them, and they're not magicians. You know, you are somewhat subject to the national view of the Democratic Party, right? And that is stuff that you can, you know, some of these guys run away from it and win in like weird red places, but generally you're at the whim of the national brand, right? And so we put all this hope in these candidates, and then it causes this huge letdown, and then we have to rebuild again. So that's why I encourage people to think about the groups, investing in the groups a little bit more.
Build on our bench is what you're saying.
Than the candidates. And a lot of people come from those groups. I'll get back to Battleground though. That was an issue where it was a top down versus bottom up, right? Somebody in DC or wherever they were like, Texas is going to flip. I'll just start a group. And they just came in there, and my friends at the Travis County Democratic Party at the time were not too fond of their approach. They felt like it was not learning from the local people that have been doing it. And so at Bridge, we believe in bottoms up, something organic, your community. And, I think that's evidenced in some data that it comes out in voter registration. If you just are a random person and you go to a random neighborhood and you sit in front of a grocery store and you register people and you never talk to them again, 15% of those people actually vote. If you live in a community, you know your neighbors, you have an event and you see them all and you register them and you talk to them and you follow up with them and you engage them, those numbers go up to 65 or 70%. So that's the difference between bottoms up and top down. So we think it needs to be more organic, people that know a certain region. And it's a long investment, right? Because we invest in a group that's doing voter registration in Tyler, Texas, usually African American. I mean, it's all pretty niche, but it's all pockets that aren't being addressed by either the state party or the big Texas organizing projects, TFNs, the big infrastructure we have out there.
I hear a lot from folks, and it's just sort of related to that we have too many DC consultants coming into Texas and too many DC people, and they don't know our state. But the reality also that I would love to share is that we don't have a lot of people running races in the state, going back to the need for fundraising consultants like yourself to step into that need. Do you have any sense or feeling of that from the campaigns that you've done? Because how do we balance that?
Huge shortage of talent. I mean, with Sam's campaign, after we won the primary, we had to do a nationwide search for a campaign manager. The first two said no. The third one finally moved there. By the time he was organized, we had lost 3 or 4 months, right? And so obviously we would have preferred hiring statewide, somebody from the state, but there just weren't a lot of resumes coming across. So we need to build the bench. But I'll say this to people that are listening that are younger and thinking about doing this, or if you have a child or niece, nephew, and they're thinking about it, you can rise really fast. So I'll give you an example. So a friend of mine, she started pole greeting and block walking, became one of our most reliable block walkers. I could send her out in the rain on Sunday and she would show up. And that was kind of her first entry in the campaign. So that's, let's say, late last year. Then she expressed interest in fundraising. So I made her my deputy. We didn't have really any money to pay her, but she kept meeting everybody and making the contacts. Just yesterday, she was hired to be the regional fundraising director for DFW for James Talarico. So
wait, who is that?
Gretchen.
Gretchen?
Yeah.
Gretchen?
So,
oh my gosh.
So that took 9 months, right? Because she wanted it. She hustled. And if you work at a campaign, there's usually a shortage of people and you just grab whatever needs to be done and you can rise so fast in this field. So I just encourage people to enter it. And it's so fun. Like I'm a campaign guy. I like the competition of it. It really is exciting and fun and you meet a bunch of great people. So I hope we can get more people into it.
Yeah, I would really love to echo that. I mean, every person I've talked to, especially young people, I just really try to emphasize that this can happen so quickly. There is such a yearning, a hunger really for young people to step up and get involved. A lot of times just showing up and raising your hand can lead to some title or responsibility that can then be leveraged to the next and the next and the next. And the rungs on that ladder can be climbed very quickly.
And we need it. We need it.
And also there's this field it needs some creativity and some risk taking. It's very similar to, it needs to be moneyballed, right? We do a lot of things that we've done just because we've been doing them, but they don't necessarily get a good return on investment. The way people consume information has changed. And now look, a lot of campaigns get that. They do a lot of digital, but even that can change, right? So, there was, I compare it to the private sector. Warby Parker got all their consumers online and they calculate what's called a cost to acquire a customer, CAC. That dollar amount was like 50 or $100, but it changed when Apple changed their privacy settings and it blew out their whole business model. So it's like, it costs them way more to get a customer than it did before. And then they started realizing, we need stores, right? And so that's sort of analogized to you need field. You can't do it all digital. So it's constantly evolving. And look, there's no set right answer. If everybody did field and only field and every house got knocked 5 times a day, then they'd probably start putting signs up saying, leave me alone. And then field wouldn't be that. But right now, it's still pretty effective because most stores I go to, they've never spoken to a campaign ever, right? And you got to break through somehow. So I just think creativity and risk taking and people maybe from other fields applying some lessons into politics would be beneficial as well.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, an appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast is going to get in so many more eyeballs than a candidate could physically ever knock on doors to have that kind of conversation, right? And it is a risk. If you have a big moment like that and you fail to meet the moment, you've just had millions of people watch that. But if you're going to break through and break the longest losing streak in statewide politics, we got to have some risk takers, right?
Well, I think also, I think candidates are overcoached.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Gretchen Whitmer, but I heard her on a Galloway podcast the other day, and she sounded like somebody had coached her so much that she was afraid to say anything wrong. And maybe you can make that argument with Kamala. I think a lot of candidates they have so many people in their ear that they lose a sense of themselves. And I just think I encourage my candidates to be themselves, and you're going to make some mistakes, but people will see the authenticity. I mean, clearly we've seen this work. Like Trump makes mistakes every day and no one cares. So it's, people are so hungry for authenticity that they'll give you a pass if you screw up here and there.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something you said earlier about transparency and money. How can candidates do that better? Because it does feel like you send so much money to a candidate and it just sort of lights on fire. Like I have no idea where it's going and how they're spending it. And then my related question is, if you have, say, a round number, $100, how would because you're just getting bombarded with text messages. I have no idea who to spend money on, how they're spending it. What would you recommend a donor or somebody at home to spend their money on? Is it a combination of the party? Is it on a favorite candidate? Is it on local? Like, how would you recommend people spend their money?
All right. So the first part of the question, I would ask candidates for audited numbers on how many doors they knocked. Because that's, again, gets back to evidence that you're sort of helping the team overall if you're knocking on doors and talking to voters. And I would encourage donors to spend more time with the staff. Ask the campaign manager, hey, what are you spending money on? Why are you doing this versus this? I mean, just spend more time understanding that. As far as money, again, I get back to every campaign needs a certain amount. Figure out what that is where they're running a good campaign. But beyond that, it's like people gave Amy McGrath $25 million in the last 2 weeks in that Kentucky race. Like, what's she going to do with $25 million she didn't know was coming? I mean, I guess we'll put up TV ads, So, really, I think fund campaigns, but to a point. And then say, okay, how much have you raised? How much and also some of these candidates, like they're wealthy. Like ask them to self-fund. I think I've given to a lot of candidates that have more money than me. I found out later. But then I would look at giving to some of these groups like Texas Organizing Project, TFN, Move Texas, a lot of the Bridge portfolio groups.
The Mission Texas podcast.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And just fund projects that you're interested in that you feel like, it's really valuable. Like, okay, we can hire an extra staffer, or we can keep this podcast going, or whatever it is with these dollars. And I think your dollars go a long way, and it feels a little more rewarding, kind of like giving to NPR or something like that.
Can I ask a pointed follow-up that might get you in trouble?
Uh-oh.
So what do we do about these Democratic elected officials in Texas who they don't have to worry about their reelection, and it seems like their campaign accounts are always flush? How do we make sure that they're doing enough to help out the rest of the team?
This came up at lunch 2 days ago with a candidate who's running in a district like that. And she was talking about how she needs to knock her district, and she thinks all of them need to do that. But I don't think they're going to do it unless you give them some kind of incentive.
Right. So how do we give them that incentive? Do you have ideas?
Thought that through. I don't know, but I think that is a big problem. Like, give them some kind of incentive. I bet Kendall could come up with something there. Maybe speaking slot at the party, or kind of help. We'll help promote you if you help grow the party. So I think that's a great question. I think that's something that really needs to be worked on for sure.
Yeah, it's just something I think about a lot because of how gerrymandered the state is. Um, those of us who have the joy and the benefit of having a Democratic elected official represent us, we are kind of, as a whole, I think, checked out because our district is safe. It's drawn that way so that more Republican seats can be safe than Democrats. And I think we get so comfortable listening to the person who's already representing us that we're not keeping our eyes on the bigger prize, which is these statewide races. And a safe Democratic vote in a safe Democratic seat is worth just as much as a Democratic vote in a deep red seat whenever you're counting statewide, right? Like you mentioned Tyler, Texas, right? Part of the 903 where I'm from is a huge area code. Nobody is really mining the 903. Every vote in the 903, Sherman all the way down to Tyler and Huntsville, where Kendall Scudder ran for city council twice, right? This is a massive, massive part of the state that, if let's be honest, most Democratic candidates, excluding Beto, who has always made it a point to come to Sherman, and I love him for it. I'll never say a bad thing about Beto because he comes to my hometown. But a lot of folks just don't mind it. They're not minding the store. And if these people are only ever hearing one side of the story, one version of the message, then we're just uncontesting huge swaths of the state.
Yeah, and it's a national problem. I mean, when people that are not political come up to me and say, "What's wrong? Why are we so partisan?" It's only one word. It's gerrymandering, right? I mean, that's the problem. That creates all those issues. And so there are people out there that are working on that specific issue. I don't know how we get an independent commission like some of the other states. But I think if Democrats ever took over the state, they should put that in place, have a.
Yeah, well, we gotta win the legislature to do that. And I don't even think we're running enough candidates to take the legislature if we were to win.
Yeah, that's another issue. I mean, I think we overlap with one or two House district races in Tarrant where we don't yet have a Democrat running. So that's tough.
Well, so do you have any, reflecting back on last cycle and your race last time, and you knocked a lot of doors, so including also talk to donors. Was there a takeaway? Was there a moment? Did you see something? Did you hear something? And you said, okay, this might be an issue for us in this cycle that maybe explained how we did in the state or across the nation?
So it's, again, back to a gerrymandered district. The playbook is the Republican that holds it will not agree to talk to you or engage you. So the playbook is pretend you don't exist. The Chamber of Commerce threw out 10 dates to have a debate with Beth Van Dyne and Sam. We agreed to all 10, and she didn't even answer their email, right? So they're hiding from their constituents. They're hiding from debate. And that was the most frustrating thing, was trying to get a journalist or somebody to write about the race, to talk about it. And if you can't break through with some viral digital video, or you can't get press coverage, then all the people in your district that might be open to the message of voting for a 25-year-old teacher who did not vote to decertify the election, there'd be a lot of people that will talk to that person and be interested in maybe voting for that person. And you can see that in the data. I mean, Beth Van Dyne outgained Trump and Cruz in raw votes. And it was because you have this Republican that goes in and they don't like Trump or Cruz, but then they assume everybody else down ballot is like a normal Republican, right? Because they don't know how bad Van Dyne is. They just don't know. And so, breaking through with mailers, and, you can only do so much field in a big general, is really hard. So it takes a little luck. It takes some doors video or something to kind of break through and grab everybody's attention. So that's the thing that a campaign staff's always trying to work on in the general.
I remember last year I knocked doors for y'all near my house in Capel, and a woman, this was in the general election. So you guys gave me a list of people that I really didn't know if they were Democrat or Republican, and maybe they leaned Republican, I think is the list that y'all were giving me. And a woman I knocked on her door. She opened the door, told her who I was. She actually talked to me, and it was nice. And she was like, "Oh, Beth Van Dyne. Oh, she's so nice. I like her." And I'm like, I don't know if you've actually like figured out who she is, and it's like you're right. Like there's some amount of messaging that has not broken through to say what she's done, and it's like how did we get here? How are we not able to break through with that kind of messaging about what kind of things that she's voted on, what she's done as a mayor of Irving, all these other things. So it was a very interesting takeaway because it was either people knew who she was and could like articulate why they didn't like her, or they were like, "Oh, she looks like a nice person," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, that's not actually the case." Yeah.
Very common for me in Dallas was they didn't know who she was. That was also pretty common. So we wanted to define her and get that message out, but really didn't scale a field program to the size it needed to be to get that out. And there was a big debate after persuasion versus turning out the base, and I kind of defer to my partner Brody on who does the field plan on how to split that up. But I mean, persuasion is more expensive. It's harder, requires a really well-trained person at the door versus turnout. You're just doing volume and getting the word out. So that debate will continue. And I think there's merits to both of those.
Well, what you're saying is you're trying to target, if I understand you, is that turnout means we know there are people out there that probably are Democrats, but they're not predictably voting. And so we need to turn those people out versus the other category of people who we need to persuade because we don't know whether they lean Republican or Democrat. Maybe they don't lean either. And we need to persuade them. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah.
We know they're going to show up and vote. We just want them to vote for our person.
And so it's a matter of who we spend money on. And is it turning out the people we know are going to vote with us? And I've also heard that there's a debate whether we want to spend money on the whole other category, which is voters who've never voted before and registering people, because that means we have more people to spend money on. So I've heard a debate that we should not be even spending money on that. Like, where do you lean?
I mean, the turnout, I think the lesson from last cycle, because it was a turnout problem in the whole country, is that all campaigns will spend a lot more on turning out the reliable Democrats, that maybe skip an election or two. So there'll be a lot on that. The persuasion thing is super interesting because what it usually looks like in the data is we're not sure what they are. And so anecdotally, my conversations with those people went great. If I didn't lead with Democrat, I led with 25-year-old math teacher who cares about schools. And then here's a woman who voted to completely outlaw abortion, went along with the whole lie that the election was stolen. This is your current representative. And a lot of those people, you could convince. They're just not super partisan. Now, there's people in our party that don't believe those exist. They think they're unicorns. I, from going doors, do not share that. I don't know the amount, but I will say the critique on that is correct. That it is more expensive. It is harder. It is, if you're doing that and you're not turning out people that was a lot cheaper to do and they don't show up, then yeah, that ends up being not the right choice. So it's a
I just had a very frustrating conversation exactly about that recently. Someone who genuinely believes that the way that we are going to win Texas is just by turning out more Democrats. And I think sometimes people can get so bogged down in their echo chambers that they forget that most people who vote for Democrats probably aren't super partisan identifiers the way you just said. Like, if you don't lead with Democrat, they're open and they want to vote. Like, the word Democrat is not actually super popular at the moment. The national brand is not great. That's not to say that individual candidates can't do much better than that polling, and they often do. But I think it's because that's not the primary motivator for a lot of people. When they say, I'm not going to vote for you just because you're a Democrat. Like, if you see online the vote blue no matter who, like, that is not compelling to a person who's not already bought in and is like got the team jersey on, right? Most people don't want to wear a team jersey. Like, they find it offensive to like their sense of American democracy. Like, that's not who they are.
I encourage everybody to go do a block walk for a candidate in a middle income / working class part of Dallas and you'll notice some things. There's no signs up. Everybody that you talk to is friendly and happy to hear from you. And they're not partisan, and they're not spending time watching MSNBC or Fox. They're working and taking care of their family. So they're out there. I mean, but the critique on that is, how much do you spend to get them, and how many can you get? So, I mean, that debate will continue. But I do believe, just from my experience, that there's a lot of them out there, and I agree with you. They're not.
And it's not like a academic theory either. Like, this is measurable, right? We can go and look in 2018 and say, just based on how numbers work, X number of people voted for Greg Abbott and Beto O'Rourke. That has to be the case just on the total turnout and how many votes each of those two men got. And same even recently, right? The number of people who voted for Donald Trump and also Colin Allred. It wasn't enough, but it wasn't nothing. It was a pretty good chunk of people. He outperformed the ticket, to his credit. I'm not hiding the ball here. I'm all in on James Talrico in this primary, but
we're open-minded.
Colin Allred did outperform the ticket in 2024. He did
by quite a bit.
Yeah. To his credit. So, Alex Andrade, not Clark. Top 3 things you think the state needs to do generally. Like, what if you were to give advice to just Texas? Like, what do we got to do to flip our state? Like, what do you think the top things that we need to do are? Okay, let's go there too.
Is join a club. Google, where you live, and Democrats, join a club, because it really helps to have fellowship and meet other people that are as kind of distressed as you. You can't possibly keep track of what's going on as far as campaigns and who's coming to speak and when can you volunteer. Get on their mailing list, join the club. You strengthen the club by giving them some money, and usually a nominal amount, and joining, and their strength in numbers. Become a precinct chair. We need more. They're really valuable in terms of educating those lower propensity voters and people who are not that partisan on who to vote for. And a lot of people really rely on that. I know I did mine for judges, because I never really knew what to do with judges. And then go volunteer in a campaign. Those are ways to get involved for people. And that's in the bottoms up. That's how we do things, because I don't know, there's nobody really that's making all these decisions. It's all a combination of our decisions. I mean, I'm rooting for Kendall to turn this party, the state party, in a real force, and I think he's already onto a good start. But that's going to take some time. I mean, we're not just going to sit around and wait for that. And so it's got to be people getting offline, stop posting, go do something, please. Give some money. If you have money, give money. If you don't have money, give your time. I think that's how we flip Texas. We all get more engaged and involved.
Well, and I think finding community where you can, and like organizing and block walking, are all combined. Like, they all kind of beget each other. Like, if you find community and friendship with 1 or 2 people in your area, and you can find a club, like, usually that leads to other things, like, hey, we're all going to go knock doors for this candidate this cycle. And that usually only happens right before the election, though you guys are actually doing some block walks for the special election, right? That's happening in Tarrant County?
Trying to help Tyler Remmett win a state Senate seat in the special in November. So we're out walking for him.
So if people want, or they're in the North Texas area, they want some experience in block walking, never block walked before, they can go head out there and volunteer for that.
It restores your faith in humanity to get outside of your bubble and go talk to people that just really don't consume news the way we consume it.
Yeah. I'll tell you, that's how I felt when I was knocking doors for my own race. And it was, you think it's scary just to go out in your neighborhood and talk to people, and it really wasn't. And I was talking to a friend in the legal community, and she was saying the same thing. Like, you tell me, Kate, what we need to do. Like, I'm trying to ask other people. And I think that's what we're trying to give in this podcast, which is a sense of what are some actual concrete items that people can do at home, because some people just need that. But when I mentioned block walking in their own neighborhood, She was saying, well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to be in my neighborhood and see the person I know who's a Trumper or a MAGA person and just get angry every time. And I personally have someone right across the street from me who always has a Trump sign. They had a Maha sign in their yard as well. I had no idea what that meant until, I figured out what that meant. I was like, Maha, I'm Googling it. And, it is, there's still people who I will say, if they have a garage door open, I'm going to tell them that their garage door is open. Like, there's still people that I care about. And, but it's nice because I've walked my neighborhood and I know so many people now, and I see them, and it's nice to see, like, I go walking and I'm like, that's a person who took my yard sign. That's a person I had a conversation about their daughter who they're so proud of that they're going to college. And it just made me feel like I'm very connected to my neighborhood, even though they may not have voted with me. So.
And from a raw political analysis, right? Like going back to what I was referencing about the Abbott Beto voters and the Trump Allred voters, this is a phenomenon that happens across the country, and we got to get over it. Yes, a person with a Make America Great Again yard sign is less likely to vote for our candidates. But it's not zero, right? In the same election where we re-elected Donald Trump as president of the United States, the same states that voted for him also elected a senator in Arizona as a Democrat, a senator in Michigan, I believe, as a Democrat. Kentucky, which goes for Trump hard, has a Democratic governor right now.
Yeah. Bashir is amazing. And, I listened to a podcast with the guy who ran his campaign, and it ended up being some really specific local issue, like fixing a bridge so people didn't have to take forever to get to work. It's solving like very specific problems, and we need to keep that in mind. Now, I'll say I do have a bias. If I see MAGA sign, I'm not knocking that door. And we will not knowingly send you to a MAGA door. We will send you to people that don't vote in primaries, and we don't really know what they are. And occasionally you get a MAGA person, but I don't want to scare people away.
I just mean to say we can't write anybody off, right? We can't write anybody off.
Yeah. Well, you might knock a door and the group of people are different, right? Like, I might have a person on my list. I'm like, I know that they are probably a Democrat and they're in that house. So I need to go talk to them.
If someone in a red hat votes for my candidate, I'm glad they voted for my candidate.
Oh yeah, I'll take them all day. But I'll lose my volunteers if I send them to too many of those doors.
That's right. One of my favorite stories about Kendall Scudder is whenever he was running for city council in Huntsville, people would come up to him and say just the wildest stuff. As you might know, he has two moms, and they wouldn't know that about him, and they'd say, the gays cause hurricanes, right? Kendall would just put his hand on his heart, look him in the eye, and say, a lot of people feel that way. And then he would pull his hand off and say, now let me talk to you about, and then he would talk about some local issue, because a vote from a crazy person counts just as much as a vote from the academic, from the well-respected lawyer or banker in town. Everybody's vote counts the same. And so you don't need to get them to agree with you on everything. I think sometimes Democrats are too interested in winning an argument instead of winning an election.
There's a lot of that. Yeah. And I think, this has been talked about forever, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but we shouldn't shame on us for losing the working class. And that's a fault in messaging. That's a fault in not being a fierce enough advocate for the working class. And that's a whole nother podcast. And that's been talked about a lot, but I agree with it wholeheartedly. That we've got to reconnect with that group of Americans. That's what we are as Democrats. That's why I'm a Democrat. I believe that, we are there for the people. And so we got to get that back. And I think we can. I think a lot of those type of voters, they sort of ping pong back and forth. There was that whole phenomenon of like Trump voters voting for Bernie and, voting for Obama and just this back and forth, and neither party is addressing their problems. So they just trying new things, until something works.
I don't think they're ideological in the way that some people assume that they are. I think that they want someone who's going to fight for them. And that's why I think there's a through line between, I would even back it up beyond that and say like Ron Paul voters right? Ron Paul to Barack Obama to Bernie to Donald Trump. There doesn't seem to be any sort of ideological cohesion there, other than there's a sense that these are candidates who were very intentional about bringing people in and making them feel like they belonged. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, they talk about these Trump rallies as they're like social events. That's where you see your friends. I mean, that's the way it is for us too with the Democratic side. But yeah, I just think, I mean, it goes back to 1980 when we decided as a society we're going to let corporations take all the extra profit from worker productivity and not distribute it to workers. And, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that was shared. Corporations have just been stealing money since 1980 and shrinking the middle class. And if you're in that group of people, you just keep voting for change because nobody's articulated why that happened and nobody's articulated how we're going to get out of it. So I think Democrats need to step up to the mic on that one.
Well, my friend Alex Andrade, thank you so much. If people want to follow your race with Kevin Burge, where do you have them follow you? And also, what do you got going on outside of politics?
It's Kevin Burge for Congress. You can Google that and you can sign up to be a volunteer. You can donate. That would be really helpful. We have a contested primary, so we've got to win the primary. Outside of that, I moved to Austin and I'm trying to, figure out how to afford a UT game ticket. Alex and I were talking about that before. So I took my kids to the games where we had really bad opponents so I could get a cheaper price, but I don't know how I'm going to go to these other ones. But I'm loving life and having fun. I'm up to Dallas a lot to help Kevin and love doing this podcast with you guys. This is really cool. And once you start putting them out there, I want to share them with all my friends. I think this is really important to do, sort of the long-term thinking. The rehashing today's news has kind of been done a lot and it's not getting us anywhere. So this is really thoughtful and really appreciate the effort you guys are putting in.
Well, we'll check in with you again, I'm sure, and see how the race is going.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Al.
You can follow us on all socials at Mission Texas Podcast. Email us at missiontexaspodcast@gmail.com. This episode is edited by Juan Jose Flores. Our music bumper is by Adam Pickerel, and our cover art is by Tina Sohn.